We are exploring Kitab Nikah from Sahih al-Bukhari. So in the previous three discussions, or the previous three classes, we were talking about the first class, which was the introduction, was talking about the importance of knowledge, and the importance of knowledge not just for men, but also for the women in the Muslim community. Then we went on to talk about the biography of Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, starting from his youth all the way up until he becomes a scholar in his own right. We talked about some of the books that he compiled. We talked about the reason for him compiling Sahih al-Bukhari. We talked about how many hadith are in Sahih al-Bukhari. We talked about the actual title and the name of Sahih al-Bukhari. We talked about the scholar Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, who initially made the suggestion that prompted Imam Bukhari to begin compiling this book. We talked about some of the journey of Imam Bukhari and putting this book together. And we now arrive at the ending of his story, which is a very tragic ending, unfortunately. But his ending, inshallah ta'ala, will be an expiation for any of his mistakes, any of his sins, just as we hope any of our endings will be, and that is an expiation of our sins and the ability to attain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy through any trial or any tragedy or tragic circumstances that we have been confronted with or faced with during the last days of our lives. So the origin of the fitna of Imam Bukhari that he experienced towards the end of his life, the origin of it is jealousy, envy, more appropriately. We use jealousy, but jealousy has it has an element of acceptability, meaning there are some instances that Islam does permit us to be jealous. And the type of jealousy that Islam is permitting is not the jealousy where you see somebody with something and you want to take it away from them, but you see somebody with something and it prompts you to want the same thing, and so you exert the same energy and you embark upon the same deeds or even greater to have what the person has, or to have or achieve greater than what the person has. As the Prophet ﷺ said, La hasad illa fil ithnatain, that there is no permissible jealousy except in two instances, one or in three things. One is when the person has memorized the entire Quran. It is permissible for you to be jealous of the person who has memorized the entire Quran, in that you want the reward that this person has. So you're jealous of the fact that they've memorized the whole Quran and you haven't. The second is the jealousy of the person who gives sadaqah, the person who has money and gives charity in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you are jealous of this person, that you wish you had the wealth that they have. Not that you wish it to be taken away from them, but you wish that you had the wealth that they had, so that you can give sadaqah like they give sadaqah, and you can get the reward or gain the reward that they will gain. And so the fact that they have money, from their excess wealth, they have money to give sadaqah and you don't, it kind of breeds a healthy jealousy. All right, a healthy jealousy. And then the last one is the jealousy of the person who fights in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has shuja'ah, he has courageousness, and you wish you had the same courageousness, or you wish you had the same opportunity to go out and fight in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to die as a martyr, die as a shaheed, and gain the same reward that the person will gain. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, I'll start with this particular quote. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, La yaslim alimun متقدم على أقرانه من ثلاثة أمور. Imam Bukhari said that no scholar who is at the forefront of his contemporaries, meaning he outshines, he supersedes, and he is more prominent in his scholarship than his contemporaries. Not that he was striving for that, but sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just honors and favors some of us over others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَاللَّهُ فَضَّلَ بَعْضَ النَّبِيِّينَ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. كما قال الله جل وعلا, Allah says that He has favored some prophets over others. وَلَقَدْ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضَ النَّبِيِّينَ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. We have favored some prophets over others. This is amongst the prophets and messengers. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not like on the same level as all of the other prophets and messengers. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that my example and the example of the prophets who came before me is like a man who constructed a house out of brick, made a house out of brick, except for one brick. There's one brick missing. And while people walk around that structure, that building, amazed at how it is built and how it is structured, and they say to themselves, this building would be complete if it weren't for that one brick that is missing. The Prophet ﷺ said, and I am that brick. I am that brick. I complete this long line of sending prophets and messengers amongst their people. I complete that list, or that long line of prophets and messengers. I complete them. So he's not like the rest of the prophets and messengers. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even amongst people of knowledge, sometimes he favors some over others. Some people have a little bit of knowledge. Some people have, knowledge that is a little bit above that. And some people, mutabahar, though they have an ocean of knowledge. They have knowledge about every single subject. They don't open their mouth about any single subject except that they're going to benefit you with something. That's just the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes it for some people. And so Imam Bukhari, he said, لا يسلم عالم متقدم على أقرانه من ثلاثة أمور. That no scholar who is more prominent than his contemporaries will be safe from three matters. Will be safe from three matters. Meaning any scholar who becomes more prominent than his contemporaries during his time will never be safe from three things. Number one, طعن الجلهاء, is being condemned or being condemned by the ignorant. The ignorant are going to condemn you. وَمُلَامَةَ الْأَصْدِقَاء, and criticized by his friends. He'll be condemned by the ignorant. He will be criticized by his friends. وَحَسَدَ الْعُلَمَاء, and he will be envied by his contemporaries. Meaning the scholars that operate in the same field, in the same realm that he is operating in, some of them are going to be jealous and envious of him. No scholar will be free from that. All right? Keep that in mind as we go through the fitna of Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala. And so Imam Bukhari's fitna started the day that he arrived in the city of Nishapur. Nishapur is one of the major cities in the area of Khorasan, modern day Iraq. And this Khorasan was the home of Imam Muslim and many other scholars during that time. All right? But he arrived at the city of Nishapur. Imam Muslim, his name is An-Nisaburi. Muslim ibn Hajjaj An-Nisaburi. He was from Nishapur. He was from the city of Nishapur. Imam Bukhari was from the area of Bukhara, completely different area. All right. So the day that he arrived at the city of Nishapur was when his fitna started. Because the day that he arrived at Nishapur, over 4,000 people, mostly on riding animals, came to the outskirts of the city, including the leader of the Muslims and great scholars during that time, to receive Imam Bukhari and to welcome into the city before he was greeted by anyone else in the city. So keep in mind, everybody's hearing that Bukhari is coming to Nishapur, he's coming to the city, he's coming to live. And, people who respected him, people who loved him, people who benefited from his knowledge, they came out to the edge of the city to greet him and welcome him in before those in the city had an opportunity to do so. All right, and this type of greeting was not done for anyone before him nor after him. You think about this in modern day times. Let's just say you live in a particular city and you benefit from the imams in that particular city, but you hear that a particular imam is coming to the city. A particular masjid invited him. He's coming to the city, and people flock to the masjid where that imam is coming to instead of coming to the masjid that they normally go to. So you got to figure, on the day of Jumu'ah, there's usually this huge crowd at the imam's masjid, but when this other imam comes into the city, a lot of those people are going to go to the other masjid to benefit from that particular imam. And you have to think about the type of feeling or the type of sentiment that is going to create in that imam. Maybe not all, but definitely some. Definitely some. I can tell you from my own personal experience, this has happened. a particular imam is invited to the city, everyone flocks to the masjid, that masjid or wherever he's invited for Jumu'ah, and the imam gets on the minbar and looks at his crowd and his congregation, and it's not as big today on this Friday as it was last week or as it was any weeks before, because everybody is going to the other masjid because this other imam is there. Now, a person that doesn't have control over the feelings, because anybody could feel some type of way, it's, do you respond to it? Do you act on it? It's one thing to feel something. It's another thing to feel that way and then act on it. That's when it becomes haram. Feelings, we're not charged for feelings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not hold us accountable for the things that we feel. Some of the Sahaba came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "O Messenger of Allah, Shaitan comes to us and he whispers to our hearts, and we start to think things that we don't even want to mention to you about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does Allah hear me? Is Allah with me? Why does he let this happen to me? Why does he let that happen to me?" The same thoughts that, permeate the minds of any individual. We're human. And so sometimes Shaitan comes and he whispers these things into our hearts, and we begin entertaining them. The Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahaba, "Do you really experience these thoughts?" And the Sahaba said, "Yes." He said, ذَلِكَ مَحْضَ الْإِيمَانِ. That is pure faith. That is a sign that you actually believe, because if you didn't believe, Shaitan wouldn't even waste his time trying to create that type of doubt and confusion in you. So the fact that you are experiencing these things, you're experiencing these thoughts, is an indication that you truly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said in another narration, he said that if you experience these things, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ وَانْتَهِ. Seek refuge with Allah from Shaitan and stop entertaining the thoughts. But he never said that we will be held accountable for the thoughts, the feelings that emerge from those thoughts. We're not accountable for those things. You understand what I'm saying? The thoughts that float through your mind, that pass, let it pass. It goes in and out. It may create a feeling, because that's what thoughts do. They create feelings, emotions. The only time that we become accountable for these things is when we act on them. You follow me? So the sentiments, they're there. We're human. But when we act on them, that is when we are treading a slippery slope. And so this greeting of Imam Bukhari in this particular fashion wasn't done for anybody before him or after him. And so Imam Bukhari, he settled in the city of Nishapur and began giving lectures on hadith. His circles of knowledge began to grow little by little by little until his circles of knowledge became the greatest in the city. So all of the other scholars, people benefited from them, but Imam Bukhari is there now, and his circles of knowledge, when he comes to give a lecture, he comes to teach, it is packed. And another thing started to happen, as we talked about in the last class, and that is that when you sit with another scholar, then the mistakes of the sheikh that you normally sit with now become more prominent. You can see the mistakes even more. All right? As one of the scholars of the past, his name was Ayub as-Sakhtiyani. Ayub as-Sakhtiyani, rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تَعْرِفْ خَطَأَ مُعَلِّمِكَ فَجَالِسْ غَيْرَهُ. If you want to see the mistakes of your scholar, of your sheikh, then sit with other than him. Sit with other than him. Because here again, if you're only taking knowledge from one person all the time, you'll never be able to see the flaws and the mistakes in his knowledge, in his perspectives, in his views and opinions. You'll never be able to see the mistakes or the flaws, because that's the only source that you're taking from. And this is one of the reasons why you have many students of knowledge that will warn you against sitting with anybody other than them. Because the fear is that if you sit with someone else, then you are going to be able to now have a gauge. If you're only listening to me all the time, then you'll never be able to point out my flaws and my mistakes. You'll never be able to see it because you don't have anything to weigh it against. But when you sit with someone else, you can say, oh, the story that this imam is telling, I heard my sheikh tell the same story, but not like he told it. He gave me a little bit more detail than my sheikh gave me. I heard that story a long time ago, but I never heard it told like that. Or you'll go up to him and you'll say, well, where'd you get that hadith from? Because I heard my imam quote that hadith before, but never in the way that you quoted it. Or he didn't mention some of the details that I heard you mention. Now you're able to make the comparison. You follow me? And this is why it is so important for students of knowledge. And I can't even say students of knowledge because that's a stretch. To even attribute this type of behavior to someone who is a student of knowledge is a stretch, because a lot of the guys who do this are not actually students of knowledge, because a student of knowledge would actually welcome you learning from others. They would actually promote others. Oh, learn from this person, learn from that person, as you find many of the scholars doing. They would encourage their students to go sit with this person, sit with that person, learn from this person, learn from that person, because they're secure in what they know. And they know that I don't know everything. No one knows everything. And I'm not afraid or I'm not intimidated when another scholar or imam or student of knowledge comes along that may have knowledge in a particular area that I don't have. I actually welcome that, because the goal is for you to benefit. The goal is not for me to manipulate and the minds of the people and to have everybody come to me as their source, their only source, or their sole source of knowledge. That's not the goal. The goal is manafi'un nas. Naf'un nas, to benefit the people. The Prophet ﷺ said the most beneficial of people are those who other people benefit from. Anfa' nas lin nas. The most beneficial of people to people are those who people benefit from. And we want you to benefit. So to attribute that behavior to a student of knowledge is even a stretch. Because a student of knowledge would actually welcome you learning from someone other than them. So Ayub al-Sakhtiyani, he said, إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تَعْرِفْ خَطَأْ مُعَلِّمِكَ فَجَالِسْ غَيْرَهُ. If you want to see the flaws and the mistakes and the views and the opinions and the knowledge of your sheikh, of your scholar, then sit with somebody other than him. In another narration, he said, إِنَّكَ لَا تُبْصِرُ خَطَأْ مُعَلِّمِكَ حَتَّى تُجَالِسْ غَيْرَهُ. That you will never be able to see the mistakes of your scholar, of your imam, of your sheikh, of your student of knowledge, until you learn from other than him, until you sit with other than him. Everybody understand that point? This is why it's always important for you to diversify the scholars that you take knowledge from. When you hear people say, oh, I only listen to so-and-so, or I don't listen to this person, I don't listen to that person, and they only listen to one or two people, then know that that person is not only shortchanging themselves, not only limiting themselves in terms of their knowledge, but they will never be able to see the mistakes of the people that they're learning from, because those are the only people that they listen to. And it's not, furthermore, it's a fixed mindset. It's not a growth mindset. A person that has a growth mindset is optimistic enough to be able to sit and listen to anybody, because I'm more confident in myself that I know how to sift through what is true, what is not true, what is false, what is true, what is sunnah, what is bid'ah. I've been Muslim long enough. I'm not the most knowledgeable person, right? I'm not the sharpest tool in the kit, but I know enough to be able to distinguish, when I hear something that doesn't sit right with me. As a matter of fact, that's what led most of us to Islam, is it not? Most of us converted to Islam because we were Christians and we were hearing things that just didn't sit right with us. So if we can do that as non-Muslims, do you think that automatically turns off when you convert to Islam? Or is that enhanced when you convert to Islam? So the senior scholar in Nishapur during that time was a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. Remember that name. Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. He was someone who others followed and took knowledge from. People held onto his words even more than the leader of the Muslims during that time in the area of Khurasan. In the beginning, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli used to encourage his students to sit and benefit from Imam Bukhari. Even Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli himself used to sit and learn from Imam Bukhari. He used to sit and benefit from Imam Bukhari himself. One day, on one occasion, he was walking behind Imam Bukhari after a janazah. And he was asking him all of these questions about the names of narrators and their kunyas and the errors that they had in some of the chains of narration. And Imam Bukhari would run through the answers like an arrow going through its target. This person is this person. His kunya is this. He's Abu so-and-so. He made a mistake in this particular hadith. This person, he's so-and-so. He's from here. His scholar was this person. His students are this person. He studied from this person. And he made a mistake in this hadith. This person is this person. And he's just running through the answers like an arrow going through his target. As time went on, envy began to creep into the heart of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. He began to backbite Imam Bukhari because that's how it starts. It starts very subtle. So I'll give you a contemporary response of how these things start. So, particular student of knowledge is giving a lecture, and then someone comes to this particular imam and says, "Hey, what do you think about so-and-so? Or so-and-so said such and such. Yeah, he's good, but, it's something that, he need to be careful of. And, there's some mistakes that he made here and there. I sat and I listened to it, but, there was a couple of errors, a couple of mistakes that he made. But nonetheless, he's good. You can take from him. You can benefit from him. But what is he doing when he does that? What is he doing when he does that? He's positioning himself as if he is above that person. He's now becoming the gatekeeper to that person, whether or not people should learn from him and benefit from him or not. And I for the life of me, I don't know why people do this, right? Especially if the person that is talking has way more knowledge than the imam that you're going to asking him about. Sometimes we put people in those type of positions to make them feel like they are greater or more superior than somebody else, when in fact they're not, because of your question. You go into them and you say, imam or masjid, they invite this particular student of knowledge to their masjid. He comes, he gives a lecture, he leaves, and then the community goes to the imam of the masjid. Oh, that lecture the so-and-so gave, mashallah, he was, and you have to be careful saying that in front of people, saying that in front of imams, because you might be fueling the envy, the hasad, the envy and the jealousy, and you don't even realize it. Oh man, mashallah, brother so-and-so came here the other night and he gave it up, mashallah. And you know how we do, we're very animated when we talk, very emotional when we talk. And it's that one little word that you said in front of the imam, because he's probably never heard you say that about him. I'm telling you like it is. I kid you not. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been around it long enough. I've been a victim of it myself. And I've seen this movie play out 1,000 times in my lifetime. You come in and you say, oh, mashallah, this student of knowledge, he gave it up. Mashallah, his lecture was on point. And, man, mashallah, imam, you need to listen to it. And the imam sitting there like, you ain't never said that about any of my lectures. I've never seen you as animated as you are when you talk about his lectures as you do with mine. Meanwhile, you probably have, but it's just in that moment is overshadowing that. You've probably praised your imam before. You've probably sung his praises on a number of occasions. But in this particular moment, shaitan got him by the lasso, reeling him in. And you don't know it. Every word that comes out of your mouth in praise of this other person, it is fueling the envy and the jealousy of this person. Yeah. And so Imam al-Dhuhli, he used to encourage his students to go and learn from Imam al-Bukhari, but envy kind of crept into his heart, and he began to backbite Imam al-Bukhari and make accusations against him that Imam al-Bukhari was actually free of. So it starts off subtle. Oh, he made, it was a great lecture, mashallah. We don't praise anyone over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He got to bring you back down, right? He got to bring some perspective back to it. We don't praise anyone over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. MashaAllah, the brother gave a good talk, and we'll just leave it at that, right? Because he has to bring balance to it. God forbid you overly praise, because when you overly praise the imam, he's okay with it. But when you're overpraising someone else, he got to bring some balance to it. He got to bring you back down. He got to bring in the sunnah. We don't want to break the brother's back. MashaAllah, just say MashaAllah, the brother gave a good lecture and leave it at that. MashaAllah. But when you say that about the imam himself, he's fine with it. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. So you got to bring some perspective. Or he'll come with he made some mistakes here, inshallah, I'll email the brother or I'll text the brother later and let him know that, he needs to correct some of those mistakes. And I've seen it. I've seen it 1,000 times. And even if you felt like, he made some mistakes, you don't necessarily need to bring that to the attention of the people. What does that do to the people? If you sit and you listen to a lecture of a particular student of knowledge, and then afterwards you come to me and you say, Brother Shadid, what did you think about, the brother, he gave it up? What benefit do you get if I say to you, yeah, the brother's lecture was great, but he made a few mistakes? What benefit do you get out of that? Other than, let me bring him down in your eyes a little bit. Let me humble him, because you putting him on a pedestal. So I need to humble him and I need to bring him down a notch. And so the way that I do that is I'll say, well, he made some mistakes. But what benefit does that bring you if he says that he made some mistakes? Especially if you don't clarify what those mistakes were. Well, what were the mistakes? Oh, he said this, and that hadith is actually da'if, and it's like, well, okay, well, what benefit does that bring me now? Overall, the lecture was a great lecture. It was very beneficial. But here again, he has to position himself to be the more superior person, even though the person that he's talking about has far more knowledge than he has. And so, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he began to accuse Imam Bukhari about a statement that I'm going to go back a little bit. And in order for you guys to kind of understand this fitna, if you remember at the beginning, I said that around the time that Imam Bukhari was, becoming a teenager, that was around the time that Imam Ahmad was experiencing his trial. He was put in prison, he was tortured, he was beat, all for not saying that the Quran is created. Now, what does it mean? I didn't take a time out to elaborate on that, but if you go back to a series of lectures that I did a few years ago during Ramadan, I think it was about maybe 2 Ramadans ago, I did the trial of Imam Ahmad. The entire Ramadan was centered around the trial of Imam Ahmad. And that'll give you a little bit more perspective on, what I'm talking about here. But there's a connection between the trial of Imam Ahmad and what is about to happen to Imam Bukhari, because this was all around the same time, happening all around the same time. So by this time, Imam Bukhari is an older man, and Imam Ahmad has already gone through the trial of saying that the Quran was not created. So there was a group called the Jahmiyyah, Jahmiyyah, Jahmiyyah. The Jahmiyyah comes from a man. This attribution comes from a man by the name of Jahm ibn Safwan. Jahm ibn Safwan, this particular individual who emerged around the second, 100 years after the Prophet ﷺ. And he started this aqidah, this belief that includes rejecting the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you'll find an offshoot to that in today's time are the Mu'tazila or the Ash'aris. The Ash'ariyah, those who deny and reject the names, some of the names and attributes, some of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the people in modern times that when you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he has a hand in the Quran, they'll say no, Allah doesn't have a hand. Hand in the Quran doesn't mean a literal hand. It means power. It's metaphorical. Meanwhile, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says he has a hand. That he created Adam with his own 2 hands. Yadallahi fawqa aydihim. The hand of Allah is above their hand. And the pledge and the treaty, the pledge of allegiance that the Sahaba gave to the Prophet ﷺ. And many other verses in the Quran. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he has a face, they say, no, Allah doesn't have a face. What that means is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's countenance, his benevolence, his generosity. But he doesn't have a face. Allah doesn't have a face. Right? This is the people in today's time. The Jahmiyyah, during that time, they completely rejected the names and attributes of Allah. They didn't do what is called ta'wil. They didn't give false interpretation. They literally rejected any name and attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah says in the Quran, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, that Allah spoke to Musa directly, they say Allah never spoke to Musa. Allah never spoke to Musa. And many of the scholars during that time deemed the Jahmiyyah to be kuffar, that they're not even Muslim. That this aqidah removes them from the fold of Islam. They're kuffar, they're disbelievers, because they reject clear texts from the Quran. In today's time, the Ash'aris, they make, metaphorical analogies, interpretations of the verses. They don't reject the verse, but they interpret it in a way that suits their meaning and suits their ideologies, rather than following the aqidah of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. These are kind of more in-depth matters of aqidah that I really didn't want to go into details about, but I wanted to just kind of lay the foundation for this fitna that Imam Bukhari is about to embark upon. So during that time, the Jahmiyyah, they convinced the leader of the Muslims during that time to buy into this aqidah that we reject all of the names and attributes of Allah. And so that leader of the Muslims during that time, he called all of the scholars in the area and brought them all to him. And he said, anyone from amongst them that did not agree with that belief that the Quran was created, the Quran is the speech of Allah and is created. If any one of the scholars did not agree to that, then they would be put in prison, they would be tortured until they eventually accept that, or they would die in prison. And so most of the scholars during that time, even the scholars of Ahlus Sunnah during that time, answered that call and accepted and adopted the belief that the Quran was created. Even many of the scholars of Ahlus Sunnah that Imam Ahmad never spoke to again, boycotted them for the rest of his life. Because he's saying, you're a scholar of Ahlus Sunnah, you should have died for the Quran. You should have died for the correct aqidah. If he was going to torture you and put you in prison and torture you, then that should have been your fate. Not to excuse yourself from that. You are a scholar. People look up to you. People take your word as law. You are not like everybody else. Any average individual could just say, yes, the Quran is created to just escape the punishment. Even though they believe in their heart of hearts that the Quran is not created, it is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what is the danger in saying that the Quran is created? Why is that dangerous? Huh? Okay, but why is the belief that the Quran is created? It is the created speech. Why is that a dangerous belief? So much so that Imam Ahmad was willing to go to prison and be tortured in prison simply for refusing to say that the Quran is created. Number one, that would make it flawed. Very good. Very good. That would make the Quran flawed, because anything that is created is flawed. Number two, it would inevitably lead you to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is created. It would ultimately lead you to say that Allah is created. And it ultimately leads to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is imperfect. And so the scholars of Ahlus Sunnah, our belief, the belief of people of Sunnah, is that the Quran is the speech of Allah. The uncreated speech of Allah. It is not created. It is the words that Allah uttered to Jibreel, who uttered to the Prophet ﷺ, who uttered to this ummah. That is the chain of narration. From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Angel Jibreel, from Angel Jibreel to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Prophet Muhammad to the Sahaba, from the Sahaba to the generations that came after, all the way up until our time today. The Quran is not created. The Quran is the speech of Allah. From Him it began, and to Him it will return towards the last days. That is the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. And Imam Ahmad stood on business. Using modern vernacular, he stood on business. And he said, no, the Quran is the speech of Allah. It is not created. And so he was put in prison. He was tortured as a result of that. Imam Ahmad, when this fitna was over with, they went as far as to say, because people try to find an entry point. Shaitan always tries to find a way to manipulate things. Right? So rather than say the Quran is created, they started saying my recitation of the Quran is created. Meaning, my movement of my lips, that's the actions of a human being, which is created, right? Then my recitation of Quran is created. All right, which kind of segues into saying that the Quran is created. So to cut off the pathway that leads back to that aqidah, the scholars, they used to say, anyone who says, Imam Ahmad said, anyone who says that my recitation of Quran is created, then he has disbelieved. He's a kafir. To cut off the path so it doesn't lead to that belief. And so one day while Imam al-Bukhari was teaching, a person stood up and he asked Imam al-Bukhari a question. He said, ما تقول في اللفظ بالقرآن مخلوق أم هو غير مخلوق. A man stood up after one of Bukhari's lessons and he says, what do you say about the person who says that my recitation of the Quran is created? Is your recitation of the Quran created or not created? And Imam al-Bukhari ignored his question. And he stood up and he asked the question again. And then he asked the question for a third time. Now, think about this for a moment. If he's standing up in the middle of the class, he's teaching a class on hadith, sciences of hadith. What does this question have to do with what he's talking about? This is what we call a setup question. As the scholars say, احذر السؤال الذي لا يريد به وجه الله. Beware of a question that is asked and the person is not sincerely seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the question. The person is seeking fitna from the question. And it's very important for a student of knowledge, shuyukh, scholars, imams, to be mindful of the type of questions that people ask and to be able to navigate. You don't have to answer every question that's asked. If you remember during our winter conference, if any of you was here, when we had the sheikh here, and one of the brothers stood up and asked the sheikh a question. And it was a question that if the sheikh had answered it was going to lead to fitna. A fitna that we are trying to move our community away from. A fitna that has ravaged and has completely destroyed many of our communities here in America. That has literally obliterated much of, what we held on dearly to of Islam. And many people today holding on to Islam by the skin of their teeth. Fitna that we're trying to move the community away from. And here this brother comes and he asked the sheikh a question in front of everybody. And what did we do? What did I do? I chimed in. I said, Sheikh, we're not answering that. We're not answering that question. And other people might have felt offended. Well, who are you to intervene or interject? Who am I? I'm responsible. I'm responsible. That's who I am. I'm responsible. I hold myself accountable. And I put myself in a position to be responsible for the direction of our community. And that question is a question of fitna, not a question that is sincere. I'm not judging the brother who asked the question, but I'm saying that the question was not asked in a manner in which it was beneficial for everybody. And as we told the brother afterwards, if you want to ask the question to the sheikh after it's over, then you can go and you can ask him privately. But on a public platform, he will not answer that question. We're not going to translate the question. We're not going to even ask the question to the sheikh. And we had already prepped the sheikh in the room, in the hotel room, before he came downstairs to speak to the brothers and sisters in the lecture hall. We were upstairs talking, and he was asking us about the same fitna. What's going on in America? How's the fitna? How are you guys recovering from? Because he was aware of what, the Salafi, not Salafi, don't go to this masjid, stay away from this person, don't listen to that person. So I'm not being vague, so you know exactly what fitna I'm talking about. He was already aware of that. And so while we're upstairs in the room talking, and we said to him, Sheikh, we're not answering any of those type of questions. We know that there's some brothers in the crowd, some sisters in the crowd who ascribe to that type of fitna. Some people just live in dysfunction. There's no rhyme or reason to it. They just live in dysfunction. Maybe they've, grown up in dysfunction. If they learn how to navigate life completely through the lens of someone who is dysfunctional. Unfortunately, that's not the type of presentation that we want to present to our community, not the direction that we want our community to go. So as a result of that, we do everything in our power to thwart and to, remove the fitna, the obstacles that lead to fitna, bi'idhnillah. So after he asked Imam al-Bukhari this question the third time, he said, what do you say about a person who says, my recitation of Quran is created? Imam al-Bukhari finally answers the question. He says, Al-Quran kalam Allah ghayru makhluq. He said, the Quran is the speech of Allah, it is not created. وَأَفْعَالُ الْعِبَادِ مَخْلُوقَةً وَالْإِمْتِحَانِ بِدْعَةً. He said, this Quran is the speech of Allah, it is not created. Is that the belief of Ahlul Sunnah? That's the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. Imam al-Bukhari was on the belief of Ahlul Sunnah, the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah. He said, the Quran is the speech of Allah, it is not created. He said, but the actions of the human being are created. He said, an imtihan, and to test me like this is a bid'ah. To throw the question out here to test me to see if I'm on this aqidah or that aqidah, this is not a part of Islam. It's not something that the Sahaba used to do to one another, test one another to see whether or not they're on the right aqidah or not. They never used to test people like this. The person is either ignorant and you teach them, or the person is unaware and you inform them. That's it. Or the person is knowledgeable and you learn from them. That's it. The person is either knowledgeable and you learn from them, they're ignorant and you teach them, or they're uninformed and you inform them. But to test people to see where they're at, sometimes people might throw my name out there. Oh, who you take from? Who you listen to? Oh, I'll be listening to the brother Shadid. It's like, scholars warned against him, man. I don't know. You shouldn't be taking. And it's from that point. I'm saying this. It's funny, but I'm telling you, there are people right now, those who know that they have been tested. They have been tested. Right? Sisters have been tested at the sit down. So, who you listen to. Check all the boxes until you get to who do you take from. Oh, I listen to, Imam Ali Davis, Abu Sajid, Imam Shadid. What? Who? Nah, you can't, I don't want to be married to no sister who take from him. Well, why not? Well, he's a deviant. The scholars warned against him, blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, she has to make a choice. It's sad, but this is exactly what's happening.
And the video that they sent behind it is...
Yeah. Stuff that they wouldn't even say about their non-Muslim friends, but they'll say about their Muslim brother in Islam. Yeah, absolutely. So after Imam al-Bukhari responds to this question, he said, and to test me like this is a bid'ah. This is an innovation to even ask me this question, to test my aqidah, to see where I'm at. He said, this within itself is a bid'ah. And after this, Imam al-Dhuhli began to criticize Imam al-Bukhari and accuse him of tajahum. Accuse him of what? Accuse him of what? Accuse him of saying what? That the statements that the recitation of the Quran is created. Meanwhile, Imam al-Bukhari never said that. He said what? The Quran is the speech of Allah, it is not created. The actions of the human being are created. And to test me like this is a bid'ah. So Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli took from this, ran with it. Oh, Imam al-Bukhari says that your recitation of Quran is created. He's on the aqidah of Jahm ibn Safwan of the Jahmiyyah. That's all it took. Meanwhile, he never said that. He never said that. But when a person is angling for you, they only need an excuse. They're already going to do what they're going to do anyway. They just need the justification. Because if they jump out there without the justification, then the fear is that they're going to be questioned, they're going to be cornered. But once they feel like they have the justification, they're going to do what they wanted to do all along. And so they begin to accuse Imam al-Bukhari of being a Jahmiyyah, ascribing to the aqidah of a tajahum. And Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he said in a crowded room one day, he said, قَدْ أَظْهَرَ الْبُخَارِ قَوْلَ الْجَهْمِيَّةِ. He said, Bukhari has now exposed that he is upon the aqidah of the Jahmiyyah. He said, وَاللَّفْظِيَّ عِنْدِي شَرٌّ مِنَ الْجَهْمِيَّةِ. He said, and to say that your speech, your recitation of Quran is created is worse than what the Jahmiyyah says of the Quran being created. فاتهمه. He said, فمن ذهب بعد ذلك إلى محمد بن إسماعيل البخاري فاتهمه فإنه لا يحضر مجلسه إلا من كان على مثل مذهبه. Here's the kicker. Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he says to his students, he said, Bukhari is upon the aqidah of the Jahmiyyah. He says that your recitation of Quran is created. He said, and that to me is worse than what the Jahmiyyah says of the Quran being created. He said, and anyone who goes to the lessons of Imam al-Bukhari after this, he said, then you should be wary of him and you should accuse him of being upon the same aqidah. He said, because no one attends the lessons of Imam al-Bukhari except that he is upon the aqidah of Imam al-Bukhari. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? And wallah al-azim, it shows you how this pattern of behavior this went on in 200s. 200 years after Hijrah. We are 1445 after Hijrah. Almost 1200 years later, and the same behavior still exists within the circles of the people of knowledge. Almost 1200 years later, a millennium later, and this behavior still exists in today's time amongst the circles of knowledge. Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he said, Imam al-Bukhari to me is worse than the Jahmiyyah. Why did he say he's worse? Because he wants to amplify, he wants to embellish, right? He said he's worse to me in my eyes than the Jahmiyyah. He said, and no one should sit in the lessons of Imam al-Bukhari. He said, and anyone who sits in his lessons after this clarification, then you should accuse him of being upon the same methodology, because anyone who sits with him is just like him. Subhanallah. La ilaha illallah. And many of these brothers who do this today, they probably don't even know this story. That just shows you that it's just something that happens in these type of circles of knowledge. There's no rhyme or reason. Envy, jealousy, as Abdullah bin Mubarak, he said, I could please anybody except an envious individual, because there is no pleasing a person who is envious of you. There is no pleasing them, no satisfying them. This is exactly what goes on today. Absolutely, 100%. 100% the exact same thing. So he began warning others not to sit in the lessons of Imam al-Bukhari. Abdullah bin Mubarak, he said, I have the ability to please anyone except a person who is envious. There is no pleasing a person who is envious. When a person is jealous, envious, there's no satisfying them. There's nothing you can do to please them. Because the envious person, they want your complete obliteration. They want you to disappear, which is why the brothers of Yusuf, what did they do? They debated as to what? One of them said, let's kill him. The other one said, let's throw him into a well and hopefully some travelers will come along and we'll sell him and we'll get rid of him. The whole objective was to get rid of Yusuf. Because a person who is envious of you, they can't live with you in the same space. And this is, very unfortunate, because even some women in polygyny, can you imagine you and this woman sharing this husband together, and there's envy between these two women? This woman wants your complete destruction. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ said, the woman will not smell the fragrance of Jannah who asks her husband to divorce her co-wife. She will not smell the fragrance of Jannah. Trying to make off with the husband and everything that he has for her and herself, and her and the husband. He said, because the woman will only have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for her to have. Whether he marries another woman or other women or not, you're only going to have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for you to have. But no woman who asks her husband to divorce her co-wife will smell the fragrance of Jannah. And it's just very unfortunate in today's time with the prevailing umbrella of ignorance that hovers over us, that we get involved in matters like polygyny And really just, we don't have the hearts. It's not that we don't have knowledge. We don't have the iman. We don't have the faith that it takes to operate in a space like that. We don't have the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have the iman to operate. Because the only thing that would stop two women from clawing each other's eyes out is faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's true taqwa. That's the only thing. And so if you don't have that level of taqwa, then you need to remove yourself from that situation. But to stay in that situation, I mean, like, you guys know better than I do some of the horror stories between co-wives, man. It's just ridiculous. And they bring all types of jahiliyyah into the religion, into the relationship with them, man. Subhanallah al-azim, you're saying to yourself, are these people even Muslim? Some of the stuff that I've heard between co-wives, it makes you question whether these people are even Muslim. I mean, yeah, there were things that went on between Aisha, Habiba, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, but it never went beyond an argument, raising of voices. Things happened. Petty stuff, petty beef, right? Happens. We're talking about two emotional creatures, trying to maintain their composure in the face of somebody else that their husband loves. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah, Allah didn't test men with that. Men wouldn't be able to handle that. That shows you how strong you guys are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, right? Men would never be able to handle that. We would kill everybody involved. The man, the woman, and kids involved. We'd kill everybody involved. Just a mere thought. We wouldn't be able to handle that. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the women with that. But to see some of the stuff that goes on between co-wives, man, subhanallah al-azim, it really would have you questioning whether or not these people are even Muslim. And so he began warning people not to sit in the lessons of Imam Bukhari. Can you imagine someone warning? You don't ever have to look at, scholars warned against Shadi Muhammad. Man, scholars warned against Imam Bukhari. I'll do you one better in more contemporary times. Scholars warned against sitting with Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen. One of my teachers, I'm not going to mention his name, but one of my shuyukh, one of my teachers when I was in Medina, he said to us one day, we were sitting with him, he said, I remember there was a time when it was only me and two other students sitting in the lessons of Sheikh Uthaymeen, because everybody had abandoned his lessons because of a statement that he made that was misinterpreted, that was misunderstood, and as a result of that, people ran with it and began to abandon his circles. Absolutely. This is Sheikh Uthaymeen, who we quote, on a daily basis, when it comes to interpreting certain things or understanding certain things from the religion. Alhamdulillah, I believe that he was a great scholar. Alhamdulillah, may Allah have mercy upon him. I pretty much have all of his books, all of his works. I love the way that he teaches. I love his patience. I love the way he explains things in detail. Alhamdulillah, I've kind of like molded myself to some degree in the way that I teach, in the way that he teaches. If you understood Arabic and you listen to any of his lectures, like listen to him talking and teaching, you would see, man, subhanAllah, he is the definition of a teacher. A teacher. He used to teach in a university, and he used to have a water gun that he used to keep in his desk. And whenever students would go to sleep, he would walk up and he would shoot them with the water gun, to wake them up. Just very down to earth. Very, very approachable. And the way that he breaks things down, man, subhanallah al-azim, unlike I've ever seen amongst any of his contemporaries amongst the shuyukh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them all. So one day, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he said about Imam al-Bukhari, he said, "Man qala bil-lafzi fala yahillu lahu an yahdhar majlisahu. وكان في مجلسه الإمام الكبير مسلم ibn Hajjaj وأحمد ibn Salama." So in one of his gatherings one day, there's a whole bunch of students around, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he stops his lesson and he says, whoever says that my recitation of Quran is created, then it is not permissible. Listen to his words. La yahillu lahu. It is not halal. It is not permissible for you to sit at the lesson of someone who says my recitation of Quran is created. And sitting in the lesson, sitting there amongst the students, was Imam Bukhari's top student, Imam Muslim ibn Hajjaj. and another scholar, Ahmad ibn Salama. And when they heard Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli say this about Bukhari, both of them got up and they walked out of his lesson. They got up and they walked out because they knew what it was. They knew he was angling. They knew that he was throwing that out there for them. He's trying to agitate the students now. The students that sit with Imam al-Bukhari, his top students, he's trying to agitate them now. So he says in the lesson, whoever says my recitation of Quran is created, then you should not sit in a lesson of a person who says something like this. And Imam Muslim is sitting right there, Ahmad ibn Salama is sitting there. So when they heard him say this, they got up and they walked out. When they got up and they walked out, this angered Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli even more. And he began to warn even more sternly against sitting with Imam al-Bukhari. And it got to such an extreme that Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli kept making an issue out of it. He said, "La yusakinuni hadha rajul fil balad." He said that this man, meaning Bukhari, should not even live in our city. I don't even want him living in the same city as me. Ultimately, he's angling to do what? Get rid of you. Because that's the only way that an envious person can live. You are the bane of their existence as long as you are around. If we looked at that in terms of polygyny, the co-wife that is envious of you will never be satisfied. You can give her your days. You can relinquish all your rights. She will never be satisfied with you until he divorces you or you ask for khula and you leave. That's the only thing that's going to make her happy. That's the only thing that is going to make her happy. She will never negotiate with you. She will never compromise with you. The only thing she wants from you is to completely disappear. SubhanAllah. And so he said, Bukhari shouldn't even live in our city. And so the ignorant from amongst the followers of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, what do you think they begin to do? Because now he's not going to do anything, right? He's not going to do anything. So what is the followers, right? They begin to now treat Imam al-Bukhari harshly. When they would see Imam al-Bukhari in the streets, they would bump him. They would talk about him. They would raise their voice and be disrespectful to him. They would be rude to him in statement and action. And this forced Imam al-Bukhari to pack his things and leave the city of Nishapur altogether. SubhanAllah. And this seems to be what Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli wanted altogether. And even after Bukhari left Nishapur, al-Dhuhli continued to warn against Imam al-Bukhari. And so every city that Bukhari went to in the area of Khurasan, he found that the people were affected by the criticism of Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. So he couldn't even go anywhere. Everywhere he went, in every city he went to, that message, that warning just reverberated. And so everywhere he goes, he finds that doors are being closed. People don't want to sit with him. People don't want to learn from him. And I experienced this personally. I had to leave Newark, New Jersey. I'm from Newark, New Jersey. I had to leave my own city because there was only one masjid, and the masjid in Elizabeth, man. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on those brothers. Masjid Dar es-Salam. That became my home. Because out of all of the masajid in the Newark area, East Orange area, the only masjid that would open their door and allow me to give lectures in their masjid is Masjid Dar es-Islam in Elizabeth, New Jersey. That's the only masjid. All of the masjids that I had relationships with was like, nah, you can't come here no more. Scholars warned against you. You know, we're going to close our doors. We don't want that. You know, some people like, we don't want that fitna here, you know, just go somewhere else. And it's like, wow. Yeah. All of the doors begin to close on you. Your life becomes very restricted. It was to the point where the only masjid that I could go to was the masjid in Elizabeth. And it was during that time I was teaching the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. They still actually have those CDs. I taught that for about a year straight. I used to work in Trenton. I used to drive from Delaware to Trenton, New Jersey, every morning, hour and 20-minute hike. Up 95 through Philadelphia. There's traffic accidents every morning. I was late for work literally every morning. I used to drive from Delaware to Trenton. And then I would drive from Trenton all the way to Newark after I got off work. I'm letting you in on just the life of a student of knowledge, somebody who's dedicated to teaching. And I believe that I had 2 classes a week. I think one on Monday and one on Thursday. And I would drive from Delaware. I would go to work in Trenton. I would get off work about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I would drive in traffic from 4 o'clock. I would reach Newark. I would reach Elizabeth probably around 6, 7. And then I would teach my class after Maghrib, after 7:30. And then I would jump on the highway and head back to Delaware. There were times when I had to pull over on the side of the highway or pull into a rest stop and take a nap because I wasn't used to driving for such long distances. You know, keep in mind, this is right after I graduated from the university. So I'm only back in America for like less than a year. I wasn't used to driving long distances like that. So I literally used to find myself nodding off behind the wheel, and I would have to pull over and, take a nap, 30 minutes, 45-minute nap. And then I would wake up and I would keep driving until I got home. I wouldn't get back to Delaware and get home until about 11 o'clock at night. Then I had to wake up the next morning for Fajr, and then I had to head to work, and that would be my schedule. That would be my schedule. And so while people, benefit, and I mean, alhamdulillah, that comes with the territory of teaching. You want to be a teacher, you want to be an educator, you want to be a student of knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to run you through the ringer. You got to be battle tested. You have to be battle tested. And there's some people, man, I'm not doing all of that. Well, then you're not built for this. You're not built for this. You have to be battle tested. As I told you before, Sheikh Uthaymeen was in a hospital in Jeddah, connected to the oxygen tank. He left out of the hospital carrying the oxygen tank, got in a cab, told the cab to take him to Mecca. 30-minute ride from Jeddah to Mecca to go to the Haram to teach his class during Ramadan. Got to be tested. How bad do you want it? I mean, for you guys, you got to find your path to Jannah. This is my path to Jannah right here. Bi-idhnillah. This is a path that if I tread this path and I deal with all of the hardships and difficulties that come with it, then this could ultimately be my direct path to paradise. Not saying I'm going to paradise. I'm just saying if I follow this path, everybody has their path to Jannah. You got to find what is easy for you to do. Find something that you love and you enjoy doing and that you can do every single day, whether you got paid for it or you didn't get paid for it. I'm not getting paid for this class. I have to leave my family. My daughter's in the hospital. I have to leave the hospital, come here, teach you, and then go, deal with the rest of my life. But that comes with, and I'm not asking for pity. I'm not saying that to you because I want your sorries or your pity or your dua. And yes, of course, I want your dua. But of course. But I'm not saying that because I want some type of pity or some type of sympathy from you. I'm just kind of giving you just a small window into my life as an educator, as a teacher, someone who enjoys and loves doing what I do. Whether I get paid for it or I don't get paid for it. I could do this all night long and I have to dime for it. There's nothing, you couldn't pay me enough for the amount of research and the time and dedication that I put into this. I do this out of love, my love for knowledge, alhamdulillah, my love for teaching. When you find that, then you found your niche. And especially if that is something that correlates and connects with Islam, you found your path to Jannah. Stick to it. Abdullah ibn Mubarak, he said, "Man burika lahu fi shay'in falyalzimhu." Whoever finds a particular deed easy for them to do, then stick to it. Stick to it. And use that as your path to Jannah. Use that as your path to Jannah. And so, Imam Bukhari got up and packed his things and he left the city of Nishapur. And even after Bukhari left, Imam al-Dhuhli kept warning against Bukhari. And so every city that Imam al-Bukhari went to in Khurasan, he found that the people were affected by the criticism and the lies that were told on him by Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. This created doubts into the hearts of the people. This caused two of the biggest scholars of that time, Abu Hatim al-Razi and Abu Zur'a al-Razi. They are known as Raziyain, the two scholars from Ray. The city is called Ray, but they call him Razi. Abu Hatim al-Razi and Abu Zur'a al-Razi, two of the greatest scholars of hadith, they now begin to criticize Imam al-Bukhari and say, Inna al-Bukhari matruk. People have abandoned Bukhari. We don't even narrate from Bukhari anymore. SubhanAllah. This speech had continued to reverberate throughout the cities until it affected two of the greatest scholars of hadith. Two of Imam al-Bukhari's shuyukh. They were from amongst his scholars. Abu Hatim al-Razi and Abu Zur'a al-Razi. Subhanallah. And they would say no one records hadith from Bukhari. Here's a statement from Imam al-Dhahabi, one of the great scholars of the latter times towards the time of Ibn Taymiyyah. Imam al-Dhahabi, he said, كلام الأقران بعضهم في بعض لا يعبأ به لا سيما إذا لاح لك أنه لعداوة أو لمذهب أو لحسد وما ينجو منه إلا من عصم الله جل وعلا. Imam al-Dhahabi, putting everything in perspective, he said that the criticisms of contemporaries, meaning scholars that lived during the same times of each other, all right? So, for example, myself, Sheikh Tahir, Dr. Tahir Wyatt, Imam Ali Davis, Abu Sajid, and many of the other imams, we're all what we call contemporaries. We were all in school around the same time. We all live in around the same time. So then you had, for example, Abu Usama, Abu Muslima, Dawood Adib, Abu Uwais, rahimahullah ta'ala. They were all contemporaries because they were all in school around the same time. They all graduated around the same time. They all came back to America, began giving dawahs, operating in the same circles around the same time. So they would be contemporaries. Imam Abu Muslima is not my contemporary. Imam Abu Muslima graduated, I believe, in like the early 90s from the Islamic University. Before I wasn't even Muslim when he graduated from the university. Right? So they're not considered my contemporaries. Those are people who preceded me. My contemporaries will be the people that were in school at the time that I would. And I can't even say Dr. Tahir because he was there many years before. Dr. Tahir and Yasser Qadhi are contemporaries because they were in the university at the same time. They were in the university around the same. I think Yasser got there a couple of years before Tahir, but they were contemporaries. So Tahir is not even operating in the same lane as myself as well as Imam Ali Davis. Imam Ali Davis wouldn't even be considered my contemporary because by the time he was coming to the university, I was already graduating. He would be a contemporary with Mufti Munir. They were all, around the same time. I graduated a lot long before many of them. All right. But nonetheless, we're still operating today within the same time. So when you say contemporaries, we mean people, scholars who are of the same caliber living in the same time. So Imam al-Dhahabi, he said, كلام الأقران بعضهم في بعض لا يعبأ به. He said that the criticisms of contemporary scholars against one another, we should not pay any attention to it. Why? Why? Attention should not be paid to the criticism of contemporary scholars one against another. Why? Why is he saying that? Why shouldn't you pay attention to the criticisms of contemporary scholars one to another? Why? Anyone know the wisdom behind that? It causes fitna. Yes, it does cause fitna. Yes, it does cause fitna. But there's another reason why you shouldn't pay much attention to it. Shouldn't give much thought to it. Because it's usually rooted in jealousy. It's usually rooted in jealousy. And so if you know that I'm jealous of you and you guys know that I have a jealousy for him and I spoke about him, you're not going to really pay much attention to it because you know that it's based on or is rooted in jealousy. So I'm not really looking deep into it because I know the source of it. The source of it is usually jealousy and envy. And they're going to try to discredit, right? They're going to try to discredit one another to see who is more superior. And that's what you usually have. That's what you usually find. Unfortunately, for many of us, we're not necessarily students of knowledge. We don't understand this. So when we hear a contemporary imam or a student of knowledge speaking about another student, we're all ears because we're drama and trauma, influenced. Anything that is drama, you'll find that it has our attention because we just love drama. That has become part of our culture. We are a culture that is infused with drama because of our trauma. We are so traumatized that the moment we see drama, we gravitate towards it immediately because it gives us an opportunity to, take the focus off our own trauma and what is going on in our lives and look at somebody else going through some struggle, and we find it entertaining. It's very unfortunate, but that's just the time that we're living in. Even within the Muslim community, even though there's so many ayats and hadith in our religion that teaches us to stay away from that type of stuff. There are many ayats in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that when you see people, engaging in lahwi and false vain speech, to keep walking. وَالَّذِي إِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. One of the descriptions that Allah gives of Ibadur Rahman, the servants of Ar-Rahman. You look at that passage, the last ayats in Surah number 25. Surah number 25. The last passage of that surah, like the last 10 ayats of that surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives an in-depth description of Ibadur Rahman, the servants of Ar-Rahman. وَإِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. And the servants of Ar-Rahman, they walk on the earth in humility. And he begins to list all of these descriptions. And one of the descriptions Allah mentions in that surah, in that last passage, he said, وَالَّذِي إِذَا مَرُّوا بِاللَّغْوِ مَرُّوا كِرَامًا. That when they pass by people engaging in backbiting, false, vain, unnecessary, frivolous speech, they walk by with honor. Meaning they don't walk by being judgmental. They don't walk by trying to, take a peek at what's lit. They walk by with honor. Marru kirama. They walk by with honor. I'm not engaging in that. I'm not judging you. That's where you are. That's who you are. But I'm not engaging. I don't walk by Surah Al-Furqan. Thank you, Sister Jade. Surah Al-Furqan, which is actually one of my favorite surahs, especially that last passage. If you ever wanted to judge yourself or measure yourself, and your actions, go through that last passage. It's the last maybe 10, 15 ayats in Surah number 25, Surah Al-Furqan. The passage starts where Allah says, and Ibadur Rahman, the servants of Rahman, walk on the earth in humility. You see it? All the way, what is it? 63, Surah 25, ayah 63. Start from 63 all the way to the end of the surah. If you ever want to measure yourself and measure your character, measure your character by how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Ibadur Rahman, the servants of Ar-Rahman. And notice Allah didn't say the servants of Allah. He said the servants of Ar-Rahman, because they have a closer relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I gave a whole series of khutbahs on those qualities and characteristics. You can look on YouTube, inshallah ta'ala. But go through those qualities, those characteristics. And one of the ayahs that he mentioned, that when they pass by false, vain speech, they keep it pushing. They don't stop and engage. They don't stop and judge. They just keep walking with honor and dignity. So Imam al-Dhahabi, he said that you should not pay attention to the criticism of contemporaries one to another. This is especially true when their judgment and their criticism of one another is based upon adawa, based upon some enmity and hatred between them, or based upon their madhab, the differences in their madhabs, or based upon jealousy and envy. 3 things. So whenever you find this person being critical of this person and it's based on some personal hatred that they have for one another, some beef they have, or based upon a difference in madhabs, this person follows this madhab, this person is Ahlul Sunnah, this person is this person is that, then, that is a given. They're going to criticize one another. They're going to launch attacks against one another. That is a given. Don't look too deep into it. Now, you do exactly what Allah mentions in that ayat. Don't involve me in that. Don't involve me in that. No, I'm not going to engage. You have to set a boundary. Set a boundary. Because it used to happen to us even as students. When we were students in the university, we used to get tested all the time. Even with the scholars. What sheikh you sit with? It's like, I sit with Sheikh so-and-so. You know what they say about him. It's just like, man, please miss me with that, man. Just go. And then lo and behold, the very next day you walk into a crowd, you're like, Assalamu alaikum. People don't want to give you salams. You're like, hey, what? Because this person who tried to tell you not to sit with that sheikh, then went back and told them, he sits with so-and-so. Man, he's off it. Don't give him salams. Yeah, this was my life in the university. Can you imagine 7 years of that? 7 years of that. And I was in the university when in the thick of it. I was in the university in the thick of it. I came in 2001, right after what they did to me, they did to Abu Muslima. They did it to him first. Everything that you saw happening to me, they had done that to Abu Muslima before. I got it a little worse than he did because I fought back. I fought back differently than the way that Abu Muslima fought back based on emotion. He got on the minbar. He used the minbar as his platform to strike back. I was a writer. My ink was my weapon. My pen was my weapon. And alhamdulillah, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it had a far greater impact. If you notice, I never gave any khutbahs about those guys, ever. They were giving khutbahs about me in Germantown, Eid khutbahs. Can you imagine your whole entire Eid khutbah about Shadeed Muhammad? I mean, I feel sorry for the people who had to go to the Eid and sit and listen to that. You bringing your children there to come listen to the Eid khutbah, and lo and behold, you bring up Shadeed Muhammad. And then you fighting with one another, and your co-wives are fighting, punching each other in the face, and you worried about the wrong stuff, man. You worried about the wrong stuff. But yeah, this stuff was going on, yes. Even students of knowledge, we were being tested. Oh, you're not sitting with Sheikh. There was times when Sheikh Rabia, who was their big sheikh during that time, may Allah preserve him, they would go and they would say, oh, I didn't see you at the lesson of Sheikh Rabia. It's like, so now you looking around the lesson, like it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students sitting in front of the sheikh. How do you know I wasn't sitting all the way in the back? Or I didn't see you at the sheikh's lesson. So what does that mean? So if you didn't come to Sheikh Rabia's lesson, you were not Salafi. Yeah, that's a fact. Or they had a term they used to say, you're not a clear Salafi. You're not Salafi wadih. Meaning you play both sides of the fence. You're not all the way in with us. So you're not a clear Salafi, because they didn't want to say you're not Salafi, because then someone would ask him, well, what's your proof? So they didn't want to be cornered like that. So rather than say he's not Salafi, we'd just say he's not a clear Salafi. Because I see him over here with these guys. I see him over here sometimes with this guy. So they wanted to restrict the people that you hung with. They wanted to restrict the people that you took knowledge from. They wanted to restrict the scholars that you sat with. They wanted to restrict everything. Who your wife hung out with. If they saw your wife with a sister who was married to a brother that they deemed to be astray, then now your wife becomes questionable. This stuff was, oh my gosh, man. I can speak about this stuff today, because, we're light years past that. But during that time, my gosh, man. And many of the people who are Muslim today probably wouldn't have survived that era. There were people, students of knowledge, who left Islam because of that stuff. Students of knowledge who sat with scholars in Saudi Arabia and ended up leaving Islam. That stuff drove them crazy. Drove them to leave Islam. Subhanallah al-Azim, man. Yeah. And Imam al-Dhahabi, in concluding, he said, مَا عَلِمْتُ أَنَّ عَصْرًا مِنَ الْأَعْصَارِ سَلَّمَ أَهْلَهُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ سِوَى الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَالصِّدِّقِينَ. He said that I do not know any time from amongst the different times that have passed that any scholar has ever been safe from being criticized by his own contemporaries. I don't know any scholar except the prophets and the truthful ones that were next to the prophets. They're the only ones that ever escaped this type of bombardment, this type of, being berated and being criticized and maligned, their honors maligned. And even the prophets and messengers, they were maligned and they were, criticized, but it was by the disbelievers during that time, never by their contemporaries. So in ending, Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his final statement, his final declaration, he said, "Min za'ama min ahl Nishapur وموسى والري وحمدان والبغداد والكوفة والبصرة ومكة ومدينة أني قلت لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق فهو كذاب فإني لم أقله إلا أني قلت أفعال العباد مخلوقة. Imam Bukhari, he said in his final declaration, he said, anyone from the city of Nishapur, from the city of Musa, from the city of Ray, from the city of Hamadan, from the city of Baghdad, from the city of Kufa, from the city of Basra, from the city of Mecca, from the city of Medina, anyone from any of these cities who say that I said that my recitation of Quran is created, then he is a kadhab, he is a liar. فَإِنِّي لَمْ أَقُلْهُ. I never said that. Anyone from any of these cities, because these were the cities where his name was constantly being brought up and people were criticizing him and saying that he said this. He says, anyone from any of these cities who say that I said that my recitation of Quran is created, then he is a kadhab, he is a liar, because I never said it. The only thing that I ever said was that the actions of the human being are created. The actions of the human being are created, and this was a clear indication that Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli and anyone else who regurgitated what he said was lying on him intentionally and sought to sabotage his honor, his rank amongst the scholars and students of hadith. Imam Bukhari in this declaration is making it clear that from this point forward, anybody, and this is the greatest clarification that a person can make, to stand up and say that anyone who said that I said this is a liar. And I don't know how many times I've said, and many other students of knowledge have said, people say, oh, Shadi Muhammad said you can't go to Jannah because, the Salafi card is not a card that's going to make you enter into Jannah. Yeah, and I said that. But in what context did I say it? I said it in the context that just because you say you're Salafi does not guarantee you paradise. There's nobody that would disagree with that. Just simply saying that you are Salafi, wearing your pants hiked up above your ankles, having a beard and a prostration mark, does not guarantee you Jannah without doing the work. One is theory. One is a theory that hasn't been tested. And the other is something that is practical that has been tested many times over. And that you can see clearly that what the person says is what the person believes is embedded in their actions. How do we misunderstand that? He said Salafiyya is not a card that's going to enter you into Jannah. What imbecile doesn't understand the context here? Somebody who doesn't want to understand. Somebody who wants to take something and then make it into something that it's not. Yeah. And so no matter how many times I say, well, this is what I meant, it's like, well, no, he still said it. It's like, you know what? I just got to let you go, man. You just got to believe whatever you want to believe. You get to a point where you get tired of explaining yourself. And you just allow people to just be who they are and believe however they want to believe. I got to a point where I was always trying to explain myself. No, that's not what I meant. And that's misunderstood. And they took my words out of context until I just got to the point where I'm just like, you know what? Believe whatever you want to believe. I'm done explaining myself. I receive emails, receive messages, DMs. Someone said, you said this. Could you explain what you meant? Nope. Not explaining nothing. Believe whatever you want to believe. If you want to believe that I'm astray, I'm a hizbi, I'm off it, scholars warned against me, and you're not going to take any knowledge from me, then alhamdulillah, you're one less person I have to worry about. Go on with your life, man. Go live your best life. You listen to music, but you don't want to listen to Shadi Muhammad. You got to be kidding me. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. You listen to music, but you don't want to take from Shadi Muhammad. You gotta laugh, man. You gotta laugh to keep from crying. You gotta laugh to keep from crying, because this stuff is just really, it just doesn't make sense to the intellect. It doesn't make sense to the intellect. You hang out with your non-Muslim friends and take advice from your non-Muslim friends, but you can't listen to a Muslim imam, a student of knowledge, teacher, preacher. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. But you sit around and listen to your non-Muslim family members tell you don't do this, don't do that, and you over here with these Muslims doing this and that, and you take advice from your non-Muslim family members and friends, but you can't listen to this imam. You don't take knowledge from him. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. And so Imam Bukhari continues to move from one city to the next. Every time he settled in one city, the accusations would follow him, making it difficult for him to teach or settle in that place, and he would move again. Eventually, he settled at a friend's house in the area, in a particular area, which was between Bukhara and Samarkand. And in the month of Ramadan, in the year 256, he spent the last days of his life in worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a dua that he made in his salat, where he said, Allahumma innal ard qad daqat alayya, faqbidni ilayka ya Rabbil alameen. La ilaha illallah. In a dua that he made in the last days of his life, he said, Oh Allah, the earth has become restricted for me, meaning I can't go anywhere. Allahumma innal ard qad daqat alayya. Oh Allah, the earth has become restricted and constricted upon me. Faqbidni ilayk. Take me to you. Take me away from here. Ya Rabbil alameen, O Lord of the worlds. And on the night of the Eid al-Fitr, after Ramadan, the year 256, Imam Bukhari died, leaving behind an ocean of work that we have not fully unpacked up until this very day. And while those who accused him and criticized him passed away with not so much as a mention of their name, you wouldn't even have known who Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli was had I not mentioned his name to you. But I know you know who Bukhari is. I know you know who Imam Bukhari is. You may not have known him in the detail and in the depth that I gave you during these few classes, but you knew Imam Bukhari. You knew Sahih al-Bukhari, but you didn't know Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli or any of the other ones that talked about him, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. Allah controls who he's going to raise and who he's going to lower, whose legacy is going to continue and whose legacy is going to die with the era. Because once that era passes, that person dies in that era, you never hear about them again. And we will see, as 20 years go from now, we'll see all of the people who did all of the talking, all of the criticizing, all of the scholars warned against him. Oh, we don't take from him. Oh, we stick with these scholars and these are the Salafis and all of that kalam. We'll see 20 years, 30 years from now, whether that legacy carries on with them or it dies with the era. And I can tell you from today's time, it dies with the era. Because most of those people don't even know who they are. People don't even know, because there was always a loud minority. There were always a loud minority that had the vast majority of the Muslim community in fear. Most of the people followed most of those brothers in their nonsense out of fear of being warned against. I don't want to be the next person warned against. I don't want to be the next person criticized. I don't want to be the next person talked about. I don't want to be the next person boycotted. I don't want to be the next person who walks into a room, gives salam, and nobody returns the salams, right? I don't want to be that person. So I'm just going to go along to get along. And that was the vast majority of people. Unfortunately, I'm not cut from that fabric. Raised differently. I'm sorry. Always have been. And so if that's the path that you chose, you go ahead and choose your path, because that becomes your legacy. Their imams and students of knowledge today, I would never speak to because of how they carried themselves through this fitna. To this very day, I don't even talk to. We'll give them their rights as a Muslim, salaam alaikum wa alaikum salam, but I would never sit at the table, break bread with you. I would never have any more than salams to give you. That's it. Lost complete respect for you because of the way that you carried yourself during this fitna. And so while people are like, oh, you know, so-and-so asked about you. Yeah, that's good. It's fine. Well, because people always going to make it seem like you're the one with the problem. It's like, you're the problematic one. It's like, well, why? You know, I mean, the brother said he forgive you. The brother asked for your forgiveness. It's like, yeah, okay. So I have to let him back into my intimacy after he showed me another side of himself? Absolutely not. First of all, you weren't even there. You came on the back end of all of this. You have no idea the level of betrayal, the level of two-facedness, the level of duplicity, and the level of utter disrespect for knowledge. Because if you went overseas and you learned your deen, you studied the religion the way that you professed to everybody else, the way you knew your religion, then why didn't you stand on business when the opportunity presented itself? It was only a few who stood on business. Only a few. And at some point, that story will be told. For right now, we let them live. Let you live with your false honor, because that's all it is. You're living in an honor that is false because nobody exposed the real you. The you that was the you under pressure. Because that's who you really are when you're under pressure. Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us. He tests us to show the real us. Because until you're tested, you're just a theory. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, right? You can say all types of things about yourself. But when you're tested, that's when everything that you say about yourself manifests. Either in your favor or towards your detriment. Totally up to you.